Last week was a very sobering and heavy week. And I don't know about you, but it left me feeling incredibly numb and just saddened with the state of our country. My heart was and still is breaking. It started with Charlotte, North Carolina, where a beautiful young immigrant named Iryna Zarutska was heading home after a long shift. She takes a seat on the subway and does what most of us would do, begins scrolling on her phone, awaiting for her next stop. She had no idea what was about to happen to her, as a madman individual who had been arrested 14 times, but released each time, pulled a knife out and stabbed her in the neck 6 to 7 times. Then he proceeded to just wander around the train with the blood dripping from the knife he still held in his hand, stating he got that white girl. Now, this is an absolutely horrific story in itself, but here's what bothers me even more so. There were many people on this train. 4 people in her vicinity around her, and not one person moved to help. Not one person went to stop that man. Not one person went to stop the bleeding and possibly save her life. They saw it. Their reactions in the video said it all. But then several wouldn't even bother to look at her. She was crying and bleeding and realizing what was happening to her, and no one called 911. Instead, one person had the gall to take pictures and videos while she bled to death, her blood literally pouring out onto the floor. According to video records, it was 1 minute and 35 seconds that people just stood by and did nothing while this poor woman died. Her blood pooling around her and all over the floor as she slumps down, and that breaks my heart. I don't know why people were so timid about helping others. I don't know if it was like the Daniel Penny case in New York where he went and he helped, and thankfully no one died in that instance, but he got arrested for it. But not helping when you see someone get stabbed and dying doesn't work here. The man was gone. He was wandering around other cars with that bloody knife. And that poor woman was bleeding and crying until she passed out, and no one did anything to help her until it was too late. Because after the fact, after 1 minute and 35 seconds, then someone did come over and try to still the bleeding. Then we have the police chief of Charlotte stating to have compassion for her murderer because he was a homeless man that had mental illnesses. But that's not even what I want to talk to, because I'm still floored at the lack of compassion for the victim that was on that train. For those that were there, that she had no one to help her. Only people watching, and in one despicable case, taking photos and video. So my question is, what has happened to our society? When did this become acceptable, to just sit around while a woman is hurt, injured, dying, and not help? Jesus told us to love our neighbor like we love ourselves, to treat them the way we would want to be treated. So who are our neighbors? Everyone around us. Now, if I was stabbed, I would hope that someone would attempt to help me, and I hope I would do the same for others, doing whatever I could, despite the fact that I have no medical degree. I have a very hard time with other people's blood. My blood is not a big deal, but that's a whole different weirdness. But I would still, at the very least, want to be there and let that person know that someone is there to care for them, to hold their hand and tell them that Jesus loves them. And that's why my heart hurts for Iryna. She had no one there holding her hand. She was stabbed and scared, not sure why what happened just happened, realizing what was happening to her, and looking around and seeing that everyone there was just ignoring what was going on. They were ignoring her. Have we lost focus on what's important, and instead we just keep our nose in our phones that we can't help those in need around us? Shame on us This is not the way we are called to live. We are called to help one another. Philippians 2:4 says, "Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interests of others." We need to start going out of our way to show love for those around us. Put that phone down. It's okay. It'll be there later. The game can wait. The news story can wait. People, time with people, caring for people, it needs to be made a priority again. We need to start bringing back a community that cares and loves for one another, because no one should die on a subway with others turning away and doing nothing. And even worse, taking time to video so they can get their clicks on social media. It's a depravity of humanity that they would be more concerned about their social media than helping a woman that's dying. We need to be people of action, not people of social media. We need to be people that care for others. Matthew 25:35-40 says, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." And the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink?" It says, "When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" The king will answer, say, "Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it for me." 1 minute and 35 seconds of someone coming to the aid of another could have changed the outcome for Iryna. We don't know for sure, but it could have. It's possible. If nothing else, it would have given her a peace as she left this world, that someone cared for her enough to try to help. That could have saved a woman's life if that one man had stopped filming long enough to jump in and stop the bleeding that was seeping onto the floor. How much time do we spend each day browsing through social media, looking at YouTube reels? We need to do a heart check. There are 1,440 minutes in a day. How much of an impact could we make if we took even 1 minute and 35 seconds to help the lives of those around us? It's such a small number. But in regard to Iryna, that 1 minute of one person helping could have saved her life. The very next day after I heard about Iryna, Charlie Kirk, renowned activist, conservative, was assassinated. Now, Charlie was very outspoken about his faith and his beliefs, and was incredibly good at debating others that disagreed with him in a respectful way. He didn't want to degrade them. He never tried to degrade them, but he gave them facts and truth and questions that made them think. As you can imagine, this can upset a lot of people, especially in their beliefs. Their truth was being questioned. And that's a lot of what Charlie did. He asked them questions and listened to their answers so that they could try and persuade him to their side. That was his whole thing. He wanted them to prove him wrong. He wanted to hear their beliefs to persuade him to their side. And sometimes they made him think. Sometimes they did actually make him consider. That I remember one that I was listening to where it was a person that was deaf, and they didn't like a comment that he had made. And he literally at the end said, "I thank you for bringing that to my attention, because that's making me think." So yes, he did. People made him think. But most often, he had logic and facts that he would ask them in return. And people would get so upset because they didn't have the answers to back up their beliefs. And they killed him for it. Well, one person did. Now, as my husband pointed out, it's good to see both sides of the political aisle overall coming together and condemning this action. Violence because you disagree with one's point of view is not the answer. At least this is the way it seemed at first. Because even my liberal friends on my Facebook feed had been putting out posts on thoughts and prayers for his family. Because he leaves behind a beautiful young wife and 2 very young children. But once he died, it was like free reign to bash him. My college daughter first pointed it out that several people in one of her classes were celebrating this death. And as it should be, she was very upset about this. They were celebrating someone dying, being assassinated, shot in cold blood, just because they disagreed with what he said. They disagreed with his politics, with his beliefs. They were celebrating his dying. Then my other daughter came home from high school and was talking about all the posts her classmates were putting up and how they have no empathy for his tragic death because of what he believed, because of what he said. Now, some of what he said they were taking out of context, but that's a whole different story. But most of all, some were saying because of his stance on the war in Gaza, he deserved it. And it doesn't matter if he had a family that witnessed his assassination. Because of all the kids in Gaza that are losing family members in a war zone, this is not a war zone. He was going there to speak in friendly debate with college students, not a war zone. Not a war zone. Others were saying that they hope his kids never follow what their father said and believed. And even others are saying because he spoke actively against trans people, he got what was coming to him. Then the memes started and the cartoons. Then even some politicians and news media stating that his death was horrible, and then they would proceed to say things that made the killing seem justified. So again, what is happening in our society? Have we gone so far that we have such a hatred for our fellow man that we actually celebrate their death? That you can't even have a healthy and friendly debate because if you disagree with what they say, what they believe, then that other person deserves to be murdered? When did it become okay to kill someone just because you disagree with them? To have no empathy for a family now torn apart, for the kids now growing up without a father, for a wife that no longer has her husband, all because they didn't believe the same as you. We are not called to be the same. God has made us all uniquely different, and that means we will have different thoughts and attributes. I mean, how boring would it be if we were all the same? But one thing that we should agree upon is truth. Truth is not subjective, but for some reason, culture is trying to make it subjective to whatever a person wants to think. And the actual truth is being attacked. Charlie Kirk believed in Jesus, and in everything he did, you could see that. In every conversation, you would hear him talk about his Lord. He was courageous to speak truth, even in the midst of being attacked. I remember watching him do a podcast where it was 20 liberals against one conservative. I think it was in Jubilee. He spoke with such conviction and grace, even when people were so angry with him for his beliefs. Someone said that he probably should have seen this coming. There were so many that were outspokenly against him, and that's true. And maybe he did, because he knew there was a risk, especially with doing it out in the open like that, as he did in so many other college campuses. But here's the thing, he did it anyway. Because talking to people and professing truth as well as his faith was important to him. He was working to make an impact on a world that is falling far from God fast. And as Christians, we should do likewise. We should speak truth. Even when people are against us, we should do it anyway. I read this on Instagram not long after Charlie was killed, and I felt it was a really good reminder for us. And it's just about 5 truths that we must hold to when the wicked attack. And the first one is, evil will not silence the truth. Violence cannot stop God's purpose, and we need to stand firm. And this is so true in this case. They thought that this would silence us. They thought that silencing Charlie would, be an end to this. It would make us cower, make us hide. But no, there's more truth coming out than ever before. And I saw, which was so awesome actually, that more people are flocking to church since Charlie's death. So there was a TikTok that said, I haven't been to church in 15 years, going this Sunday. Another said, I've never bought a Bible until now. Violence can't stop God's purposes. 2, life is fragile and eternity is forever. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed, so we must live all out for Christ today. Live ready and live like eternity matters, because it does. It does. Whether you believe in Jesus or not, there is an eternity after this life that you'll be going somewhere. Life is not guaranteed. Number 3, Christians cannot cower. Like I was saying before, they try to stop us by silencing Charlie, silencing Christians, but we can't cower because darkness will not drive us into hiding. We need to still continue to speak truth with boldness. Number 4, pray with faith and stand with courage. Christians don't wring their hands. We got to lift them up in prayer. And now is the time for prayer, courage, and uncompromising truth. The real truth, the truth. Number 5 is very important too. Do not become the evil you seek to eradicate. Jesus repeatedly warned us against using evil and sinful tactics to eradicate evil and sinful men. We can't be like the world. We have to be like Christ. And if we're going to be like someone here on earth, let's also learn to be like Charlie. We got to hold on to the truth, speak it with salt and grace, and never back down from our convictions and beliefs. We need to be a salt and a light to those around us. Charlie once said this: if you believe in something, you need to have the courage to fight for those ideas, not run away from them or try and silence them. We need to be louder than our enemies. We need to have a voice that is loud and speaking the truth. At the same time that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, as if this week couldn't keep going crazy enough, there was also a shooting in Colorado at Evergreen High School. Now, thankfully, there was only 2 students injured that I'm aware of at the time of this podcast, and no one was killed, which is a relief. But it is still so heartbreaking to hear of all this violence in our world. But I'll tell you this, guns aren't the problem. Obviously, Iryna didn't die from a gun. It was a knife. So weapons aren't the problem. It's a heart problem. We have a sickness that is growing in our world, a sickness that is depraving us from our humanity, a sickness that only has one cure, and that is Jesus. So many have been trying so hard to fill this hole within our hearts, but that hole can only be filled by one thing, because it is a God-shaped hole. And if we try to fill it with anything else, we are lacking. We aren't happy, we aren't joyful, we have no hope, which leads to anger and bitterness. And the more we have moved Christianity out of our country, the more we try to replace the God-shaped hole with something else, the more we have moved Christianity out of our country, the more we have pushed churches to be like the world instead of having us change for Christ, the more that sickness grows. And the darker this world gets. But there is good news. John 1:5 says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. We have to turn back to the light, back to the truth, back to Jesus. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And we need to be the light this world desperately needs. 2 Timothy 4:3-4 says, for a time will come when people will not tolerate sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths. We need to pray for those that go out and speak truth, because more and more people don't want to hear this truth. We need to see our fellow man as people that are loved by our Creator, and every life matters. We need to go out and help others and not shy away from them when they are being harmed. Like I said before, we need to speak truth even when others don't want to hear it. We need to continually pray for our world. And most importantly, we need to be a light that shines in the darkness, because when you focus on Christ, that darkness will never overcome.